Hi there, and welcome to Oakland Side 510. I'm Darwin BondGraham, news editor at the Oakland Side, Oakland's independent nonprofit newsroom. This week, we're going to dive deep into what's going on in City Hall. I'll be chatting with City Hall reporter Eli Wolfe about recent reporting. Then I'll catch you up on some other stories from our newsroom, including Oakland Pride has a new home in Dade, an innovative project to clean the air in West Oakland using plants. I'll look behind the curtain to see who the most active lobbyist in City Hall is, and a strike at Kaiser that just ended even as Oakland Unified teachers are preparing to possibly go out on strike themselves. But before all that, a word from a local company supporting this podcast. Today's episode is sponsored by the owners of Jack London Square, Oakland's waterfront, right at the edge of the estuary. Whether you're catching the Sunday farmers market, grabbing dinner with a bay view, or just taking a walk past the historic Heinold Saloon, Jack London Square is where Oakland meets the water. With restaurants, live events, the ferry to San Francisco, and more, it's Oakland's only publicly accessible waterfront destination. Come see what's happening. Visit jacklondonsquare.com. All right, now let's turn to what's happening at Oakland City Hall. We're 2 months into 2026, and it feels like the start to an average year in Oakland. An election year, I should say. We're already seeing lots of conflicts and controversies, some big legislative swings, and lots of expectations. I'm joined by Eli Wolfe, one of our two City Hall reporters at Oakland Side. Eli, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Darwin.
Let's start with Mayor Barbara Lee because there's lots to discuss. Starting with the question that everyone's asking, is she running for re-election?
Yeah, she has not said publicly, but her campaign finance disclosures tell an interesting story. She's raised about $31,000 in the second half of 2025 for what appears to be a re-election committee. That's a lot more than any of the other people who are officially in the mayor's race have raised. But we've tried to reach her campaign to ask about her plans, and they didn't get back to us.
Okay, so when might we know for sure about her plans?
It is unclear. Normally, we know someone's running because they file their nomination papers, which Leah's already done. I suspect she will announce closer to the deadline for filing papers to enter the race, which will be around August. But it's so far away that the city clerk hasn't even posted any of the deadlines yet.
So for now, she hasn't confirmed anything. She's raising money, but it's not a lot of money. We just don't know.
Right. And separately, she's maxed out her office holder account. She's raised about $100,000, which is the legal limit, and spent a large portion of it on charitable donations to organizations around the city.
Eli, a question we get a lot is, what has the mayor been up to? How would we describe Barbara Lee as a mayor? What does she seem to care about? And how does she spend most of her time? And I just want to be clear, we're not in the business of endorsing politicians or telling, people who to vote for, or really even giving people our personal opinions about who's in office. That's not really our job. But based on your reporting, Eli, what can you say so far?
Yeah, these are good questions. There's a lot to say. Folks will remember that Lee was elected last April to finish out the term of Sheng Tao, who voters recalled in November 2024. Tao, you may also remember, was indicted last year for allegedly participating in a bribery scheme with a city contractor. So that's the act that Lee was following.
Yeah.
Lee's administration has been pretty laser focused on the basics of city government. You can find her roadmap for governing, which is this 10-point plan that she released right after being elected, which basically spelled out her agenda as continuing investments in public safety, both police and the DVP, cracking down on illegal dumping, reducing homelessness, and reviving Oakland's economy, kind of like bread and butter issues. Her administration has also been quiet compared to the last one, which admittedly set a pretty high bar for excitement.
Yeah, lots went on.
Yeah, some people say too much. Lee proposed this 2-year budget last year that the city council approved with pretty minimal changes. So this is very much Lee's budget. It's been nicknamed the Nobody's Happy budget because it cut a lot from different departments to balance a big deficit, but it kept things running. Lee has also presided over a period of declining crime in Oakland. This is important because I think that's going to be one of the big metrics she's judged on if she actually decides to run for re-election.
Yeah, it feels like crime really kind of dominated some of the last few election cycles. Maybe that won't happen this time.
Yeah, I mean, that was the big thing behind the recall. Among many of the other issues they trumpeted, crime was the big one. So I wouldn't be surprised if it comes up again. Another issue that we're definitely going to see in this election is homelessness. Lee does not appear to be on the same page as some of the other members of the city council who want to pass this new encampment abatement policy that would basically give the city more leeway to remove homeless encampments and vehicles. It's unclear how that is going to play out, but it's definitely created some tension between Lee and other council members.
That could become like a bigger conflict, a much bigger storyline probably, huh?
Totally. And I think we're going to see more when that policy comes back to council in the next few weeks. One other thing that I'll mention is that Leah spent a lot of time preparing for federal immigration enforcement actions in Oakland. She and other public officials were on high alert last October when it looked like there was going to be this big deployment in San Francisco and elsewhere in the Bay by CBP. And earlier this year, she passed executive orders that bar ICE from using city property for operations. Lee is not alone in being a really big critic of Trump, but this is a much more personal issue for her, I would say. She was a member of Congress during the January 6th insurrection. She is actually still part of a lawsuit against Trump over that incident. And I think that is going to continue to define her tenure as mayor if she is reelected. And sorry, one last thing I'll say is that if you are in Oakland and you're interested in what Barbara Lee is up to, definitely check out her social media accounts. She is very active in posting on Facebook and Instagram, so you can follow the day-to-day operations of the mayor and her team through that.
In some ways, it feels like I'm getting 2018 vibes. People might recall that in the spring of that year, then Mayor Libby Schaaf issued a very public warning about an impending immigration operation that she had become aware of. And it blew up and it actually became this big crisis in a way. And it put Oakland in Trump's crosshairs briefly. So city leaders are still seemingly striking that defiant note against Trump all these years later. The city's structural budget crisis, though, feels a little different. Like a decade or so ago, Oakland was probably in better shape because of its red hot economy, especially the real estate markets. But that's changed a lot now, right? And the homelessness crisis, meanwhile, that's something that past mayors have had to struggle with. But the numbers of homeless people have really exploded since the 2010s or so. And so it's kind of the newish problem that only the past three mayors have really had to confront. And so far, no one has shown that they can get people off the streets faster than new people are jolted into homelessness. So yeah, it feels like there's some similarities and some differences in terms of what Mayor Lee has to confront and has to work with. Okay, Eli, let's dig in a little more into something Lee has been doing since she took office. And that's raising private money for city programs. This is something you wrote about recently.
Yeah, it's a practice called behested payments, where a public official personally solicits money from companies or foundations for other organizations. This is one of the main ways that Lee has been raising money for public services. She reported 15 of these payments last year, totaling around $900,000. Someone to pay staff salaries in her own office, someone to outside organizations that were handling things like gun violence prevention, arts and culture, immigrant support services, things like that.
That's fascinating. So this is like a way for Lee to raise money despite the city budget being such a wreck. She can raise money for her policy priorities, it sounds like. And there was an even more recent example, right?
Yeah, a really big one happened earlier this year. PG&E and Kaiser Permanente agreed to put about $900,000 toward reviving the city's police cadet program. Both of these companies have been backing Lee with cash since she took office, but this was a pretty big deal. Her chief of staff told us that Lee was aware that these private partnerships could help take pressure off of Oakland's ongoing budget problems, as you kind of alluded to. So she's definitely investing heavily in that.
How common is this practice?
It's not at all unusual for big city mayors. Former Mayor Libby Schaaf used the same tools to raise close to $44 million between 2017 and 2022. So Lee has a ways to go to make up the difference.
Wow.
But ethics experts say that it can actually create real and perceived conflicts of interest when the companies that are giving this money have business before the city.
I bet.
Yeah. The other big open question here is whether Lee will stay on long enough to maintain those relationships. Funders want continuity of leadership, and they're still waiting to see if Lee will actually formally jump into the race again.
Okay, let's talk about immigration and immigration enforcement. Lee signed those executive orders about that back in January, right?
Yeah, she did. On January 29th. She signed these two orders at a press conference at City Hall. The first bars federal immigration agents from using any city-owned property as staging areas, processing locations, or operations bases for civil immigration enforcement. You may have seen headlines talking about ICE-free zones. That's what this is. The second one directs city departments to prepare response plans in case the National Guard or federal immigration agents show up in Oakland. It also reaffirms the city's sanctuary policies. So a big piece of that is that OPD will not assist ICE in civil immigration enforcement, which has been the case for years.
And she specifically referenced what's been happening in Minneapolis. It sounds like she really does not want that kind of scenario to play out here, right?
Totally. The Trump administration launched this thing called Operation Metro Surge, which brought 3,000 ICE and CBP agents to Minneapolis. There were protests, there was violence, 2 people were killed by agents. Lee said she doesn't want Oakland streets to become a combat zone. That's a big priority for her. At that same event in January, Congresswoman Latifah Simon spoke to Oaklanders. She said that she just traveled to Minneapolis, and she really painted a grim scene of what's going on there. So Lee, Simon, pretty much every Oakland official is trying to avoid a Minneapolis scenario.
Yeah, this is all just really making me think that things are kind of like echoing the past here in really strange ways. People might recall back in 2017, there was a firestorm of controversy when the Oakland police chief at the time, Ann Kirkpatrick, she permitted 2 OPD officers to block off a street in West Oakland to allow ICE agents to actually raid a house and detain 2 people, one of whom was eventually deported. It seems like city leaders now never want there to be any ambiguity in policy again, and they're taking a hard line against all things that are related to immigration enforcement. Okay, switching gears, there's also a story right now about this task force that's recommending really big changes to how Oakland's government is structured. What's up with that? Are we going to abolish the city council?
No, as much as some people might want that, but there are some big changes that are being contemplated. Lee convened a working group over the summer, and last month they released this report that listed out these recommendations that would move Oakland towards something called a strong mayor system. Under that, basically, the mayor would be the chief executive with direct authority over city staff, and she'd have veto power over the budget and legislation.
Wait, you're telling me the mayor doesn't have that power right now?
Right. And this isn't a surprise to us, but it definitely surprises a lot of people who live in Oakland because they may not know that Oakland has this weird hybrid structure of government where the mayor doesn't have veto power and she can't directly run city departments. This kind of stuff runs through the city administrator, who the mayor picks. Meanwhile, the city council can't direct the city administrator and city staff. So the working group says that this creates confusion. It undermines accountability. I think there's some residents who would agree with that. Some of the other changes that they're recommending would strengthen the city council. So there'd be a new budget analysis office, subpoena power for council members, and they're proposing eliminating the at-large council seat.
These sound like really fundamental changes that would require amendments to the city charter, right? And wouldn't that mean they have to go to voters to get this stuff approved?
Yeah, totally. Any changes would likely go on the November 2026 ballot, which is the same election where the mayor's race is happening. So candidates could be running for jobs whose exact description hasn't been finalized yet.
Okay, I'm going to take my prerogative here again to sort of look back in time, because this I feel like sort of echoes some of the deeper political history in Oakland. Not to go too far on a tangent, but 1998, when Jerry Brown ran for mayor, he campaigned for this thing called Measure X, right? That created the system we have today But back then, Measure X was viewed as a way to strengthen and centralize the city's chain of command by vesting more power in the mayor, specifically the power to pick the city administrator. So this year, we might see a ballot measure that, again, like further strengthens the mayor's office while people are running for mayor. Okay, who else might be running for mayor in November?
At this stage, we're months out from the election, and I think the best way to tell who's serious about running is to look at who's actually raising money, whether it's a candidate or a political action committee or PAC. Campaign fundraising, I'll say, is public information, and that really helps us out as reporters in tracking all this stuff. So here's what we know. There's a Republican named Mindy Petchenik, who is officially in the race. She's raised about $7,700 last year. Oaklanders might remember Petchenik ran against Mayor Lee in 2024. She is a MAGA-aligned Trump supporter. She's also a supporter of Lyndon LaRouche, a conspiracy theorist who was convicted of tax fraud.
Whoa.
Yeah, some interesting history there. There are some other folks who have declared that they're running, but I haven't seen any of them file disclosures about what they've raised or spent. So we'll cover more once we see those disclosures. There's also a bigger outside money story, which is this PAC called Revitalize Oakland, which raised about $690,000 last year.
Wow.
Yeah, most of it came from a real estate developer, a hedge fund partner, and a couple of cryptocurrency executives. About a third, more than a third of their spending went toward Lauren Taylor's mayoral campaign in that special election. Taylor lost to Lee. He is now the interim CEO of the Black Action Alliance, which is this advocacy organization that recently put on a gubernatorial debate. That organization has very close links to some of the stakeholders behind Revitalize. It's some interesting connections. Whether Taylor gets in again is one of the big questions for 2026. He published this op-ed last month saying that he hasn't ruled out the idea of running, but he definitely hasn't filed any papers as far as I'm aware. One other thing I'll note is that unions have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars already to support a ballot measure that would impose a new parcel tax on Oaklanders. The city council approved a budget last year that banked on getting $40 million from this tax. So there's a lot riding on voters approving this measure.
That's really interesting. I mean, if Taylor jumped in the race, he would obviously have, his base of support. And it sounds like, from what you're saying here, there'd potentially be a lot of money also for his campaign. So switching gears from the mayor's race, I want to talk about the city council. Let's talk about District 7 Councilmember Ken Houston, because he's in the news a lot.
Yes, he is. He is dynamic, and he has supporters, and he also has his critics. He's got this kind of in-your-face and hands-on style of politics that's gotten him in some hot water at times in the year or so that he's been in office. Back in November, he announced at a city council meeting that he'd filed an ethics complaint against Josh Rowan, who at the time was the director of both Public Works and Transportation. He didn't name Rowan publicly at the time, but we figured it out through reporting and put out a story. Rowan then filed his own ethics complaint against Houston, accusing him of interfering with several multi-million-dollar city contracts. There's a paving contract, a parking meter contract, and a security contract for City Hall.
These are serious allegations. What happened with these dueling, these counter complaints they filed against each other?
Yeah, so the Ethics Commission, which handles these complaints, dismissed Houston's complaint against Rowan back in December. They found no evidence that there was a violation there. Rowan's complaint against Houston is still being investigated, so we don't know what the outcome of that will be.
And then there was the dumpster, the dumpster story. Tell us about that one.
Right. Yeah, this was interesting. In January, my colleague Natalie Ornstein and me reported that Houston had asked two OPD officers to release a man who'd been handcuffed on the street on suspicion of illegal dumping. Houston said that the guy that they detained was actually working for him, trying to remove a dumpster that Houston claims had been attracting illegal dumping to this intersection in East Oakland for several months. Houston basically said it was all a misunderstanding. However, it raises some questions because the city charter prohibits council members from directing city employees, including police officers.
And Houston denied wrongdoing, right?
He did, yeah. He said that he was just explaining the situation to the officers, not directing them. And I should be clear, I mean, there are people in East Oakland who really appreciate his kind of hands-on style. We heard from constituents who say that they're also seeing real improvements in street cleanliness thanks to him. But he's had these repeated run-ins with city staff, and that's also getting a lot of attention.
Okay, speaking of the hands-on style of politics, there was a middle finger incident.
Yeah. This was back in December during a city council meeting where they were reviewing this proposed contract for flock surveillance cameras. Tons of people showed up there, and there was a pretty contentious public debate about crime, cameras, civil liberties. And at one point during the meeting, Houston appeared to flip off members of the public who had shown up to speak out against the cameras. Houston sort of denied it, but then he embraced it. He put up some really interesting social media posts about it. His supporters either excused it or cheered it, and his critics said it revealed character unbecoming of a council member. So it was a really polarizing incident.
Eli, before I let you go, there is one more story related to the mayor's office that I feel like I have to ask you about. The mayor's car.
Yeah, it feels like every administration there's a story about the mayor's car. Over the President's Day weekend, someone broke into the mayor's office at City Hall and stole the keys to a city-owned SUV that she uses. The vehicle was stolen and then recovered within hours in Vallejo. OPD is investigating that case. They arrested a suspect recently. There's private security at City Hall, so it's still not clear how someone got access to her office. There's been some reporting that the person was hiding in the city attorney's office.
Wow.
Yeah, it's not a good look for a part of the building that's supposed to be very secure. Lee put out a statement saying that no one in Oakland should have to worry about their car being stolen, whether they're a resident, a city worker, or the mayor. And unfortunately, that's hardly the most concerning thing that's happened to Lee since she became mayor. Last year, a man was charged with making racist death threats against her. So there's understandably a lot of concern about the security of City Hall and the security of the mayor.
Yeah, that's a reminder that public safety challenges are something that touches everyone in Oakland. Eli, thanks for catching us up on all this.
Thanks, Darwin.
You can find all this reporting at oaklandside.org. We'll link to everything in the show notes. All right, let's get into some recent reporting from our newsroom. There's more in the full stories, which we'll link to in the show notes, and you can always find more at oaklandside.org. Sign up for our daily newsletter if you want to get our reporting in your inbox. Oakland Pride is getting a new home and a new date. This is big news. The nonprofit that organized the city's Pride Festival had some financial problems in recent years that caused hiccups with planning. But Pride is now merging with the Oakland LGBTQ Center. The merger should provide more stability and resources, say people involved with the move. And the LGBTQ Center has hired 2 staffers to take on the job of organizing Pride. The celebration, by the way, is moving from September to August 16th, so something to look forward to. Okay, there's a really cool project that's about to launch in West Oakland. The goal is to create cleaner air by greening roadsides at key intersections. In March, the Prescott Greening Project, a collaboration between Hyphy Design, an ecology firm, and landscape designers Art Garden Design, is going to begin planting dense rows of trees and shrubs along Frontage Road near I-880. According to people behind this project, the greenery can scrub fine particles out of the air, helping to prevent health problems like asthma that harm so many West Oakland residents. And this is a pilot project. The idea is to plant living landscapes that filter the air like this in other parts of the city in the future. Here's a story about how the sausage of local policy is made in City Hall. Our politics reporter, Eli Wolfe, looked closely at the disclosure filings of Oakland lobbyists. These filings track lobbyist activities and show who they contacted last year and what the issues were that they lobbied the city council and other city officials about. Eli found that while there are nearly 60 lobbyists registered with the city, only about 10 of them were responsible for something like 70% of the lobbying activity. So it's kind of concentrated. And I'm not going to name names here, but I will say this is an interesting and revealing look into how local power players work on behalf of companies seeking contracts, developers seeking permits, and nonprofits trying to advance policies. On the labor front, there's lots of news about strikes and potential strikes. First up, a 4-week strike by thousands of Kaiser Permanente healthcare workers in California and Hawaii ended Tuesday morning, even though no contract deal has been reached. The workers have asked for a 25% wage increase over 4 years to make up for wages they say are at least 7% behind their peers. Kaiser Permanente had countered with a 21.5% increase over 4 years. What's next? Stay tuned. Second, and perhaps more on the minds of Oaklanders, is the potential of a teacher's strike. Members of the Oakland Education Association, which represents OUSD's 2,500 teachers, nurses, counselors, and social workers, voted overwhelmingly to authorize a strike last week. This was after 11 months of failed negotiations. The school board met in closed session on Tuesday, and it sounds like they're hoping to work out some kind of way to avert the strike. But if the strike happens, we'll get 48 hours notice. So again, stay tuned. That's it for headlines. We'll link to all of this reporting in the show notes. And that's it for this week's episode of Oaklandside 510. You can find all of the stories we talked about today at oaklandside.org. Sign up for our daily newsletters to get our reporting delivered straight to your inbox. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen. Share it with your Oakland friends and neighbors. The more people listening, the more we can justify keeping this show going. This episode was produced by Mark Nieto, edited by Tasneem Raja, and hosted by me, Oaklandside news editor Darwin BondGraham. On behalf of our entire newsroom, thank you for showing up for Oakland. We'll see you next week.